Hi, folks, with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about equality before the law and the view that is rapidly increasing around pretty much all the law schools and the practice of law, jurisprudence around the Western world. That is, until social outcomes are exactly equal across the board, until that happens, the law cannot be applied equally to all groups and all people. So if someone is in a protected group or a marginalized group, they are not as accountable to the law as a straight white Christian male. In fact, every group in society is now a protected group in some way or other, except straight white males. Straight white males are the only unprotected group. And because of that, they're now the only group that are fully accountable before the law. So what this means, let's just call it F. What this means is there is not two-tier justice, but multi-tier justice. So there's a case recently where a straight white male made some rather intemperate, by the way, and ill-advised remarks in public about that were construed as being anti-Semitic. I wouldn't call them outrageous, and in the overall scheme of things, not that bad. But were they intemperate? Would I say something like that in public, or no? I wouldn't. But this, if my assessment is correct, this is my view, of course. This gentleman was acting rashly and would probably not qualify as a genius in any sort of Mensa type rating. But anyway, he got up and made some. Again, I wouldn't have thought they were that bad, but for those, the professionally offended, those desperate to take offence, then his words were useful in giving them something to complain about, and complain they did. And the police became involved. Then the Department of Prosecutions, the district attorney type equivalent, decided we're going to get this fucking Nazi, and went after him. And for his, I wouldn't call them pleasant remarks, definitely not. But would I call them illegal or dangerous or threatening? I wouldn't describe them as that. But that's only me, of course. That's just my opinion. They decided to drag him into court. Now, I understand the man's not well cashed up, so he had to take a legal aid lawyer, is my understanding, or a cheap lawyer, if not a legal aid lawyer. And his lawyer says, well, why don't you just say, roll over and say, yep, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of hate speech and anti-Semitism, Nazi, fascist, swastika, da-da-da-da-da. And maybe they'll go easy on you. Maybe they'll go easy on you. So his own lawyer sells him out, in my view, in my opinion. His own lawyer sells him out. And because lawyers are now representatives of the state and the state power apparatus, they're not your lawyer, whether you're paying them or not. They're definitely not your lawyer, in my view. And so the guy cops the guilty, but instead of getting an easy thing, he got a minimum of 8 months, as I understand it, in prison for saying something that was allegedly hateful. What was the linchpin of the case, though? What was the case that, how did the court, the judge, who, by the way, is my understanding, was Jewish and an activist, how did the judge, that's my understanding, that's my opinion, how did the judge arrive at the conclusion? Well, they inferred intent. So this was how they nailed it. Well, what you said wasn't really that bad, hey, but you intended to be bad. Your intention was to be evil. Hitler, Nazi, fascist, swastika. That was your intention. And so we got to put you the fucking prison, you fucking Nazi Hitler. So, wow. So they can just infer intent. Now, this inferring intent is relatively new in jurisprudence, and is always the sign of I believe, a tyrannical society. So in the Soviet Union, the communist societies, they would say, well, okay, what you did wasn't bad. All you did was borrow a book on Shakespeare out of the library, but you intended to be Hitler. And so they could just make these allegations and assertions. And it was always that they used to nail them. That was it. Your intention was to do such and such. You intended to be a spy. You intended to be a counter-revolutionary. You intended to be an enemy of the people. And as they did, by the way, in the French Revolution, when they formed the Committee for Public Safety, which ran around hanging and hanging, guillotining, and murdering people randomly for their safety, of course. And so we see this with tyrannical regimes that are out of control everywhere, and the lessons of history have definitely not been learned. And you would think that judges would be the custodians of sobriety in terms of legal cases, sobriety, and sticking absolutely to the facts. But the facts wouldn't have supported a jail sentence or even a court case, in my view. So they had to go, but you intended to be bad. And so it was very clear, you intended to be Hitler. No, the guy didn't fucking intend to be. Well, you're making fucking bullshit. But by this stage, he's already pleaded guilty. So based on his lawyer's advice, so the judge can just issue the findings. Yeah, you intended to be guilty, and you said this, and that meant you're fucking Hitler, you fucking fascist, fucking Nazi. Where's your swastika? And so on it goes. And this is happening all over the Western world at the moment. This idea of impugning or saying that. Now, this began in places like the divorce courts. Yeah, well, you intended to abuse the children. You intended to, abuse your wife, or you intended to do this, and when actually no such abuse had taken place, nor could any be proven. But the court could say, well, you intended to, and that was good enough. And so we see that concept of jurisprudence along socio-ideological lines has crept into everything. So how is it two-tier justice? And surely anybody who would say unpleasant things, but in this case, the Jewish diaspora, wouldn't they all go to be, the police would jump all over them, and they'd get dragged into court by an eager and salivating Department of Public Prosecutions, and then thrown in the fucking slammer by righteously indignant judges? Well, no, actually not. So the vehemently anti-Semitic statements being made during the Palestinian marches and the protests and riots and so on. It's on tape. I mean, you can look at the videos, you can hear it, and you can see a lot of the people making these things. They're even making very clear and vociferous anti-Semitic statement, far worse than what this straight white Christian male did, far worse, absolute, off the charts worse. Are they being arrested? Are the police showing interest in them? Is the Department of Prosecutions going after them with ruthless laser like fun? No, absolutely fucking not. Well, why not, you would ask? Well, the straight white Christian male is not a protected group. The full force of the law, invented law, imagined law, and you go after that motherfucker and throw him in prison. But the brown people are different. And so they're not being, for far worse crimes, in my view, in my opinion, for far worse crimes, they're not even being touched. They're not, no one's even going near them. There are no resources of the state going chasing after them, as indeed, in my view, there should be. So my view is that one law for all, and all are equal before the law. So if person A, from whatever socioeconomic group or diaspora they're from, racial diaspora, religious, doesn't matter. If group A says, so and so and so and so and so and such, that's one could argue is defamatory or at least rather unpleasant and vulgar, even uncouth, then they get chased after and thrown in the slammer, then everyone else should be for the same thing or worse. So that's clearly not the case. So uni students can run around, lesbian white women can run around screaming, anti-Jewish slogans and making the most outrageous claims and assertions. They're not being arrested. Well, why not? Why is it only the straight white Christian male gets it? Why is it only him? And that to me is the bigger issue, and something that brings, I would argue, in my view, in my opinion, brings great shame on the Department of Prosecutions, the government, the police, and indeed the judiciary for, and the dude's lawyer, for allowing this or facilitating, making sure that this outcome. Now, I'll close with this by saying that the judge, now judges should be completely apolitical in my view. That's my view. And yet the judge said, well, we have to give the harsh sentence, and stressing it was harsh, even though in my opinion no crime had actually been committed, and the whole case rested on just the judicial assertion, well, you intended to be bad. That was it. That was the case. I mean, how the fuck that can be a case for involving prisoners beyond me. But we have to make a severe example. We've got to kick the shit out of this fucking Hitler Nazi just to show all these other Hitler Nazis that are everywhere, omnipresent, every corner, under every bed, in every closet. We've got to show them that we're fucking tough. We are big, muscular, and tough. We don't take no shit from those fucking Hitler. And so we have to give a harsh sentence. So there was now. That's in my view, that's a political statement, not a judicial statement. It deviates from the facts, and it deviates from the gravity or lack of it of the case. And so, in my opinion, the judge is making a political speech or statement there, which would suggest that the independence of the judiciary is certainly in question. Now, the judge, in my view, is an activist and not just a straight out impartial judicial operative, practicing sort of the purest form of jurisprudence and the highest standards of due legal process. So now, what would I have done if, let's suppose that the police and the prosecutions drag the guy into court, whether his lawyer, I would question your lawyer, why did you tell your client to plead guilty? He's a fucking Nazi anyway. Can't you look at him? Look at him. He's a fucking Hitler. No. Why did you do that? You're meant to defend him. You're meant to prove his innocence or attempt at it. You're not meant to say, hey, let's just throw you under the motherfucking bus, you damn Nazi. That's not a lawyer's job. Was a lawyer a political operative? Was a lawyer who was predisposed to let's get all the Nazis, signed to him or something? Where does this go exactly? That in my view would involve a serious investigation. But okay, the guys in the court and on the judge say, look, buddy, that's dumb to get up and say things like that. I mean, really. And if you have those private views, fine. But this is not something you would put out in the public domain. I mean, look, buddy, I'm going to put you on a good behaviour bond. Try not to attend political rallies if you don't mind. But I would do the same to anyone who came along, saying, listen, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. You're pretty dumb. I wouldn't use these words. You're pretty dumb in the overall scheme of things. You can't afford legal battles. And so why don't you just sort of engage in some better behaviour and a bit more forethought, and then we'll call an end to it. Okay, next case, bang. That would be how I would handle it. But putting the fucking guy in fucking prison, I mean, you're kidding me. But this is how it's all over the Western world. Look at the behaviour of Democrats and their foot soldiers, and they can burn down buildings and goodness knows what, Antifa and so on. And nobody cares. They don't get any prison time. But some granny with cancer who's walking around the Capitol somewhere around January 6th is hunted down by armies of FBI agents and dragged off and thrown into prison. And that shows you the multi-tier justice that is going on. And we need to reclaim our legal system. And this needs to stop right now. You've been attached to us today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.